Hey guys, just waiting for some people to come in. Yeah, just waiting. How you doing? There's some news that we got to talk about. Some pretty serious news we got to talk about, man. The Marvel fanboy is pissed. Okay, let's wait till a few more people are in here, and then we'll dive into the two main stories, and then I got a jet. But move some things around to make sure we can cover this. But man, this is crazy. Brian, I will be on you. Mikhail, how you doing? Michael, Tony, Tali. Quit slurring or sad now. All right, so once we got this set up, can you guys hear us? Can you guys hear me okay? Don't worry, John's right here. I know, right? It's kind of weird. If Matrix 4 gets announced, Matrix 4 gets announced, and it's like, oh, that's some cool news. You get the Bond title, and then I'm like, all right, Matrix 4. Whoa, that's crazy. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly this Spider-Man shit comes out, and you're like, what the hell's going on?
It's a big day in the neighborhood. Everyone's making money moves today.
So, John, in case people don't fully grasp some of it, you want to give some, I feel like you might be better at explaining some basics of what's been going on. So, like, Marvel's only
news.
gotten a small... we'll start with Marvel, then we'll move on to Matrix, okay?
So the best of my limited understanding is that with these Spider-Man Homecoming, Far From Home, and appearance in Civil War moments in the Spider-Man current film series, Marvel has only been making money off the first day ticket sales, which is a lot, but not much compared to what the movies probably rake back in.
And arguably what they deserve to make.
Well, yeah, for the course correction that has happened with that series since they came in. So yeah, what Sony wanted to do was stick with that deal. What Marvel wanted to do is basically co-produce 50-50 on those movies, thus basically giving them a bigger stake in them, arguably more control in them. Sony was not about that, and we haven't heard if there's been any kind of counter offer of any variety. So right now it certainly sounds like the Marvel involvement with Oh, and they also wanted further or potential further involvement in the other Spider-Man universe movies. That's like Venom, things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, nobody went for either of those yet.
Well, I bet there's some behind the scenes talk that went down with having some more MCU characters sort of cross paths, so that way they could get Venom into some MCU films or their Spider-Verse movies, whatever they can do to get crossed into there. Okay, so I feel like there's two sides of the argument here, most likely that are going to occur. This news is pretty fresh, so I don't know exactly what it is. One side's going to say Sony's being greedy, another side's going to say Disney's being greedy. Because let's face it, Spider-Man would not be reinvigorated and revitalized and is what it is now if it wasn't for the deal that they struck with the MCU. It brought it into the MCU and made it something different, especially after the Cataclysm event that was the Amazing Spider-Man films with Andrew Garfield. Like, those were just, those sucked at the box office. They were just only Sony joints. But you know, like with what Spider-Man, I know they have their own thing going on now, but fact of the matter is, they need each other. The other side of people saying Disney being greedy, I mean, think about it. It's like, I think they deserved a bigger percentage than 5%, if that's what the actual number is. 5% is pretty low.
Yeah, 5% of one day's grosses.
Of one day's grosses. Yeah. When Spider-Man Far From Home, Spider-Man Homecoming are so strongly linked and benefit so much off of its involvement with the MCU, it arguably deserves a bigger percentage. Now, I could understand the shock value of, wait, we had 5%, now you want 50%? It is pretty big.
Well, and Marvel also wants to throw in their own, I think they also want to throw in more resources to produce them, as well as taking arguably a bigger cut for doing so.
Yeah, from my understanding, from what Collider reported on their website, is that, one day gross. From my understanding, what Collider reported on their website is that they're still in negotiations. Like, if this was official, we probably would have heard, like, officially from both studios by now, as opposed to just Hollywood sites or movie news sites reporting on this, because this is nuts. I think it would be moronic. It would be so stupid if Sony did not further continue their relationship with the MCU. That would just be completely idiotic. I understand that 50% is a much bigger asking as opposed to 5%, but I bet they wanted more MCU involvement with the other Spider-Man characters as well, like this whatever Spider-Verse they're developing. So, what's up, John?
No, I'm just looking here in case there's any more.
You leave the chat, I feel naked without you,
Oh,
John.
sorry.
He just abandons us, man.
Because
But
yeah, they want to co-finance the movie too. They want to do a 50-50 financing thing.
Especially if they want them to be more involved too.
Yeah.
Especially if they want them to be more involved.
See, the thing too, to me, is also they've had, especially after Far From Home, a very significant Spider-Man involvement, and it seems like it sets up for the future. So, if Sony doesn't play with this, if they didn't play nice about this, like, what happens then to the future of... Like, it doesn't sound from the announcements of what's coming in the next phase like Spider-Man's going to be hugely instrumental, but he also did serve as the transition point between two phases, so he does seem significant, you know?
Well, Spider-Man Far From Home is the very first Spider-Man movie to ever cross $1 billion, and it's a really great success because of taking place after Avengers Endgame, being linked to Avengers Endgame. So while 50% is a lot to ask for, I mean, from this complete outside perspective, without having all these details, like with none of us having the full scope, with having the full details, to me it sounds fair when you got a property and you got two studios who are both reliant on this. Like, Spider-Man needs MCU more than Spider-Man needs Sony, if you just look at the Spider-Man property.
Well, yeah.
So 50-50 sounds ideal and just completely fair for the bargain.
Well, it seems Sony would be basically silly to not realize what an asset their link to Marvel is, because they would be, I think, very foolish not to be very aware that their current success of Spider-Man has a huge debt of gratitude to their agreement here. Not to say that it's only Marvel that made this happen, but I just read from this, and this is just my own interpretation, some kind of weird insecurity or something. Like, they really want to hang on to Spider-Man, even though, like, Marvel really has been significant in reinvigorating the character after Sony took it in the amazing direction. So,
and people are chiming in saying negotiations are still happening. Of course, negotiations are still happening. It's not like I said earlier. This is definitely not something that is completely official. So gosh, it's.
We haven't heard if there's been a new counter or anything.
But I felt like once Sony started developing more of their Spider-Verse, like with Into the Spider-Verse, and even though it won an Oscar and it didn't have like anywhere near the box office success of any of the solo Spider-Man movies or even Venom for that matter, but when Venom was a big box office success, I feel like this was a fear that a lot of us were feeling Sony could, because this was always a possibility, the fact that Sony could eventually pull out from the Marvel deal. This is a possibility. It was always up to open for contract for renegotiation. So it wouldn't be the thing with Sony's history. It's not a complete surprise if they end up doing this officially. Remember the days when Amy Pascal was there and she just said stupid shit in interviews next to Kevin Feige? What happened to those days, man? What happened to those days?
Well, and isn't even the Pascal company involved with this too? Like, I don't know who to blame for any of these things anymore, but these negotiations probably take a lot of time to redraft. There are probably lawyers, arguing about this right now. So this can't be the last we have heard about it. And I think that, if you look at it, Marvel gets the shaft more than Sony does. Because if you look at Sony's movies of Spider-Man right now, they've had Nick Fury and a couple auxiliary elements. They had, obviously, Tony Stark, but not in a way where they couldn't continue making the home Spider-Man series without Marvel.
True.
They wouldn't have to lose Tom Holland and blah blah.
We got Mace Windu. Thanks, buddy, for the contribution here. He said, "What are they going to do with the end of Far From Home? His identity revealed, J. Jonah Jameson, and his relationship with Michelle thrown away with no conclusion." Well, the report says that they're supposed to have at least 2 movies in development, and for sure, John Watts and Tom Holland, they're supposed to have 2 more Spider-Man movies at least. The question is now, will Kevin Feige be lead producer on those films? But but that does throw a wrench in their plans. I heard something that they had like a 9-movie Spider-Man plan, and what they left at the end credits, the mid-credits scene for Spider-Man Far From Home, clearly they had huge longevity plans for Spider-Man. Yeah. And if this doesn't go through, this throws a wrench in the development of the MCU and whatever timeline plan they had. They're known to adapt. They've changed things along the way. The idea of Thanos wasn't even introduced until Avengers Assemble. So that wasn't even part of their original plan to get to Endgame through this manner. So it's a bummer because clearly they had a specific plan of what they wanted to do.
Well, I think they had a specific plan of how they wanted this to affect the MCU, but to your point, I don't think this actually means if they don't work out a deal that we won't see those characters continue. I feel
they'll continue.
Sony
just through
can
Sony.
Definitely carry on, what happens with MJ, all that stuff. It's just you won't hear about the snapping and things like that, Which again wouldn't be great, but I feel like they wouldn't have to reboot again or something like that,
I would be if it officially gets reported that it's not happening, I would be pissed. I would be very upset.
Seems like an ungreat idea.
You have Spider-Man Homecoming, which is so specifically tied to Iron Man, and then even Far From Home it's just so tied to Iron Man, and then you got Happy Hogan in there. That linkage is so vital to those stories. It's a necessary part of this specific Spider-Man solo franchise. And then to completely don't mention Avengers, don't mention Stark. It would be a reboot. It would be a reboot. Like whether or not they want it to be, it would essentially be a soft reboot of sorts.
It would change things.
Yeah. All right. I think we've talked this to death. Is there any specific comments that you got? Like those are pretty much. If you guys are just chiming in now, I've pretty much said everything, but if anyone has a specific or unique take, John will read from one of your comments and see, and then we're gonna move on to Matrix 4 right after this. The thing everyone really wants to talk about.
Night Dark just wants a Spider-Girl movie instead. Most people are just arguing over who sucks between Sony and Marvel. Somebody's throwing in some support for Sam Raimi being the credit for
we might finally get that Spider-Man 4 Old Man Pete coming into the frame here.
But hey, they did Spider-Verse, so
that's true.
They had their own people on Spider-Verse.
All that Stark Tech shit that Peter Parker got, we just can't acknowledge that anymore.
I guess it would hurt Spider-Verse a whole lot less than it would on the home series.
No, hey, Spider-Verse and all that's really working.
Spider-Verse can do whatever.
All the other Spider-Man films are fine, but
this continuity is
Sony.
If they can't work
the
it out.
biggest successes have been from the MCU with Spider-Man, so they would be foolish to not make something happen. Anyway, yeah, so there are people who hate Sony and there are people who hate Disney, and everyone's taking sides right now. This is fun.
When the Titans clash, we lose.
Yeah, but they are just, at the end of the day, there's nothing official, so let's not entirely freak out just yet.
Yeah.
All right.
Chances are all these people love money, they'll figure something out. They'll figure out what makes the most money.
That's true. Eventually, don't worry, Disney will eventually just buy Sony and everything will be fine. And then they'll buy Amazon and the boys will come into the frame and just really screw up the tone of everything.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay, really quick, on to the Matrix 4. That's why I'm wearing my Matrix. This is the news I really wanted to talk about, and this completely overshadowed all my thoughts.
Sensei.
The Matrix 4 is happening, and I actually believe it because Lana Wachowski actually started talking about it, and she put out a quote about being excited to be involved in here. This
basically going back through their old ideas and working with their friends again and stuff, so it seems like it will be, heavily entrenched in their classic mythology.
I bought tickets for they're re-releasing the Matrix. This must have all been very specifically planned. They're re-releasing the Matrix in theaters for 1 week. I did buy tickets. Matrix 1 and Terminator 2 are tied for my top 2 favorite movies of all time. I feel like the ideas and concepts as technology has evolved and yada, 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 that the Matrix is probably more relevant now than it ever has been. It was very relevant then, of course, but I'm curious. I'm cautiously optimistic. I put out a poll earlier on our community page going, okay, so who Are you guys excited? Yes or no? Or are you just going to wait for a trailer? If I were to vote, I would say wait for a trailer. I'm cautiously optimistic about this. The Wachowskis themselves haven't necessarily made that good of a movie in a very long time. At least for the mainstream, one could argue about how cool it is, of how they present their philosophies and all those awesome things.
Imaginative ideas and
Yes,
concepts.
and how strange and against the norm they can be. But in terms of attainable mainstream movies, they haven't really done something that appealing. What's interesting to me about it is honestly beyond the fact that Neo and Trinity are somehow coming back. The two characters who, in case you haven't seen The Matrix, the two characters who died in The Matrix Revolutions, they haven't announced Lawrence Fishburne, who did survive.
Ha.
So I'm wondering if this is going to be an actual part 4 that takes place afterwards. Mm-hmm. But then again, even if it wasn't, shouldn't Morpheus still be around? Yeah,
You would think.
Someone who woke up Trinity and woke up Neo.
This is also maybe they
Sense8
haven't
was great. Yeah, that's
gotten
true.
to talk to him yet or something. I mean, it would be very weird if he didn't come back. Though.
Yeah, and Jada Pinkett also did survive, and also
Niobe spinoff.
Also, they also what do they do? They have like different screenwriters now attached for Matrix 4. Lana Wachowski will be writing on it, and she's the one who's signed on to direct.
They don't know what Lily's involved in.
And then Lily Wachowski is...
There's not been any comment on whether or not she's going to be directly involved, although Lana's quote does acknowledge their ideas together, so...
Yeah, so I would be more... If they were both coming back, I'd be more excited. I'm happy that they actually have a couple of writers on board. Who are not just the Wachowskis,
yes.
Because I feel like that's where some of the problems happened with Matrix Reloaded, and even though they were the ones who helmed entirely the Matrix, I feel like a lot of the problems can be associated with the screenplay for Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions when you just let those sisters go loose, just like whoa, what the hell's going on?
Well,
yeah.
I think there is a time and pressure difference too, because I got to imagine that part of the reason we have this announcement, aside from the anniversary, is the Keanu-sance. Their times are different now, and not just from the way that they're different from 1999, but we've had the benefit of the passage of time. And with people like the Wachowskis who can be hit or miss in terms of their reach and their grasp when they come up with these crazy ideas and stuff, I feel like the passage of time, especially for a world and a project like this, can actually be a nice thing, especially if they've had time over the years to let some of these ideas percolate, also see what worked and what didn't work about the sequels, because those had, I would imagine, a direct pressure to be produced quicker, be more spectacular, and have probably a more difficult balance between the ideas and how the movies are presented. There are actually some great video essays on the Matrix series as a whole. Patrick H. Willems, but...
what I will say, too, is that someone... Who just said that in the comments there? Pigtail, talking about the cinematics. That is true. Imagine when the visual effects for the Matrix were groundbreaking decades ago. Imagine how freaking insane they would be today.
They're gonna invent bullet cameras that are just like you load a camera into a gun and shoot it, and then it's bullet vision, and it's gonna new tech.
Weirdly, this is one of those franchises where people are like, how could they do this with? A lot of people are chiming in about this. How could they do this without? With Neo and Trinity being dead, how do you do a proper sequel? That doesn't make any sense. The Matrix is one of those franchises that can figure out some weird sci-fi bullshit way.
And who knows?
And we go, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Well,
sure.
And they might just go ahead and make that part of the premise of the movie. It's like, why are we back? You know?
Yeah, they could just be the programs, because Neo and Trinity are programs as well as embodying these physical bodies.
Yeah.
But, they could have something to do with that. Maybe they just exist within the Matrix, but they don't exist within the real world of, like, Zion and stuff.
Well, and the thing about the Matrix, too, to me, is that it is a series that has the benefit of a lot of expansions, not just movie sequels. It has, like, the Animatrix, it has the video games that were actually somewhat involved. I feel like we've just had enough Matrix stuff, and the mythology is rich enough, the world is broad enough that you could expand, you could do things with it, and you could make it relevant beyond just being like, we gotta make that Matrix money. So things like that give me just like a cautious optimism, because you say Matrix to me, it's not a franchise I think, oh, you could never. I'm just like, you have to really think it out and do the right thing, but I think it is someplace you could go and do something both cool and relevant with.
And the funny thing is, the Matrix is the one franchise, too, that if you wanted to call the Matrix 4 the Matrix Rebooted, It would work.
And that could be a part of the someone rebooted the Matrix.
It could work.
It could be
It's
meta.
a weird thing.
So perfect. Yeah, look at that.
All right, guys. Well, this was fun. As we've been talking, I've also been distracted by all you guys arguing in the live stream, as expected.
Who loves Marvel? Who loves Sony?
So keep talking with each other. Keep leaving comments. Are you more excited for The Matrix, or are all your emotions strictly focused on this potential Spider-Man news? Keep in mind, it's not officially confirmed from Marvel, Disney, or Sony yet. So, yeah, I think it's important, though, to go to social media and let the outcry go.
Let them know.
Let them know.
They watch.
Because they pay attention to that, and if enough people are like, don't do this, which everyone is, they'll definitely be like, look, we got to figure out a way. or else we're going to piss off too many people, you know what I mean?
Remember how fast we got that second Aladdin trailer? They'll figure something out to make the horde happy.
All right, guys. We'll talk with you soon. Thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you everyone for chiming in. Got to go run a couple of personal things, but much love. And keep a lookout for more uploads this